I am very pleased to be here this morning to provide you with an address on the issue of monitoring. Now, from my perspective, that is a type of function that is mostly implied in most of the organizations that we work for. We don't tend to talk too much about it because it's sort of a back-end type of function. But I will say this, that without the monitoring that you do within the organizations that you work for, it's very difficult for you to make decisions of any type. That monitoring information that you and your organization conduct leads to policy decisions within your organization. They lead to operational decisions within your organization. Okay? And they certainly lead to economic decisions within your organizations. And yet, we don't talk about monitoring from what I'll call a holistic perspective very often. We just assume that it's being done, and we assume that information is being shared, and we assume that that information is being used to make decisions of some type. So I'm here this morning to really tell you about the story about where Alberta is moving with respect to its monitoring of the environment, perhaps set some context as to why Alberta is taking this directional path, and then share with you some of the actions that Alberta is currently taking to move Alberta along its new path. So, the story here in Alberta starts, and as always right now, in the northeast part of our province. What I want to indicate here is that the driver for Alberta's directional change with respect to monitoring of its environment really starts with that activity that's been taking place in that part of our province. And I'm not here to shill for the oil and gas industry, but I just wanted to sort of put up here that is there an economic opportunity in that northeast part of the province? Absolutely. Does it drive the economy of our province and perhaps across our country? Sure. Okay. These are the economic impacts that we can expect from that activity that's taking place there. This is the importance that the resource sector adds to the Alberta economy. And as Rick has said, I'm a graduate of the University of Alberta in engineering. And I always like to point to the second bullet on this slide, which says that we have by far the highest per capita number of engineers, geologists, etc. And so the importance of the northeast part of our province cannot be understated. Okay? That there is a economic opportunity, and with it comes an expectation right now that we are doing that resource extraction in a sustainable way. So you can get all of those details when you look at the presentation online. But I just wanted to start that was the driver for Alberta to begin to examine the way that we operate and we move forward with a monitoring system here in this province. I'm going to switch gears a little bit and say, okay, but then why is Ernie showing this particular picture? And I'm showing this particular picture because this begins to sort of identify why we've had to think about our monitoring system here in this province and how it shapes the way that we want to have a new monitoring system in this province. So I think everyone is quite familiar with the picture on the right, on the bottom right. Okay? That is the iconic image that people tend to think about when you talk about oil sands activity in this province, right? Open pit mining, lots of impact on the landscape, right? That is the iconic image. Okay? So, who's the person on the top left? Does anybody know who that person is? James Cameron, right? Famous Hollywood director. Okay? Have you ever asked yourself, what does he know about the extraction of oil and gas? Probably not a lot. But yet, I put him up there because in my mind, or at least from my perspective, James Cameron represents what I'll call the height of hysteria that took over a lot of people when they saw that iconic image on the bottom right. Everyone became an expert. Everyone had to come up and see what the impact of that oil sands activity was. And people sort of hailed James Cameron's visit here to Alberta as, oh my God, someone's going to come and set the Alberta government straight on that activity in that northeast part of the province. So, the point that I'm making here is that yes, we have a substantive activity in that northeast part of the province. We have iconic images of what that impact is. We have a range of experts coming in to tell this province what it should do. Okay. And all that has resulted in detractors of that economic opportunity, that these images have come up, right? You have images of people protesting against Canada's sort of activity and moving its energy extraction forward. You have people openly and publicly protesting against and putting up images that Alberta is producing dirty oil. We have more visits to the oil sands than I think we can shake a stick at over the last few years. So, what is the impact of that? And the impact of that, in my mind, is that we have had an erosion of social license here in this province. Okay? That people are not accepting necessarily that that economic opportunity of extracting oil sands resources in this province, that is not a socially acceptable activity. Or, if it's not socially acceptable, certainly the level of acceptance of that activity has certainly been downgraded over the years. Because, think about it, Alberta's been in the oil and gas business for how long? Quite a long time. And was there any sort of hue and cry about conventional oil and gas extraction when it first started? No. Okay. So, what has caused what I'll call the erosion of social license relative to the extraction of oil and gas here in this province? And I would identify really three causes to that. First cause that I would identify is that sometimes the truth doesn't matter. Okay? And what I mean by that is that if you recall over the past couple of years, there's been a lot of information put out about that activity in the northeast part of our province. Okay? Some of it is truth, some of it is not. Okay? But it really doesn't matter, because what happens is that the people that hear that particular version of the truth first believe, or tend to believe, that version of the truth first. So what it all adds up to is that you have so many people coming out and saying, well, here's the real impact on the environment, or here's the real truth about that extraction activity. And what it boils down to is it's all a set of confusion of facts. No one knows or no one believes the other. Everyone thinks that their version of the truth is the truth. Secondly, the second cause of this erosion in my mind is that government reporting currently is not credible. And I think that that's very true. That when government releases a report or makes a statement about what the impact is on the environment, it could be in the oil sands, it could be in southern Alberta, we're not seen as credible. And the third cause that I would identify is the picture that I've flagged up there. Okay. That's a picture that was sent in, and it was described as the impact of oil sands activity on fish species in the Athabasca River. And it was held up as the version of the truth. Here is the impact of the oil sands activity boiled down to one icon or another iconic image, a two-mouthed fish. Okay. So that was highly reported in the newspapers, okay? But when the truth came out that this fish died from natural causes, and that this fish basically its mouth dropped as a result of its death, and that it was a natural cause, came out. Was that reported? No. Okay. So what I would say is that the third cause is this desire and this need by the public and by everyone to have what I'll call instantaneous type of information. Okay? They clamor for this, right? People want to touch data, people want to be able to use the data on their own, and people want to be able to come to their own conclusion. And it's all driven because we have things such as your device, whatever it is, whether it's a BlackBerry, iPhone, iPad, laptop. Everything is about instant messaging. Everything is about being able to touch and feel that data and get it right there and then. Okay? And currently, we don't have that. Okay? If you go, just to go back to my second point about government reporting not being credible, go to our website right now. You can find information, but is it really the stuff that you're looking for? Is it data? Is it pictures? Is it uplinked to anything? The answer is likely not. So, what did government do here in Alberta in relation to all of those things that were happening back in 2010, 2011? Well, I like to joke that government did what we do best. We struck a number of committees to examine the issue, right? And we did. I mean, both the federal government, the provincial government struck a number of these expert panels. They sent them off, go look at the problem, come back and tell us what you found. And so I just put up a couple of examples of reports that subsequently came in to the Alberta government, range from the federal panel report that was chaired by Elizabeth Dowdswell, to the Royal Society of Canada expert panel report on monitoring or in the Athabasca region, to the Alberta Environmental Monitoring Panel that was formed in 2011, to the Alberta to the Monitoring Working Group that was formed in 2012. They all culminated in a set of what I'll call expert advice into the Minister of Environment and Sustainable Resource Development. And here's what government did. So government looked at all that expert advice. They basically said, we accept the recommendations that came in from the Alberta Environmental Monitoring Panel report and on the working group report. What government announced in October of 2012 was that they accepted those recommendations, that there would be a fundamental change in the monitoring system, that's what the minister called it, and that we would begin to transition away from our current system for monitoring of the environment here in this province, and that there would be a arm's length public agency that would be created to lead the system, and that the monitoring system here in Alberta would be a province-wide system beginning in the oil sands region of our province. if that was the direction that was announced by government, why the change? Okay. Was the system broken? I've used this diagram to try and illustrate what our current system is. And I would just point to two particular columns in my diagram. It's kind of a busy diagram, but it just tries to show what I think is an easy way of looking at the current way that we do business. And I would ask that you look at the second column under the term of uncoordinated, and the fourth column that we've identified as islands of knowledge. Okay? And I think that that really describes some of the issues that we face in our current system. Uncoordinated in the sense that we have many players involved in monitoring of the ambient environment here in this province. We have people such as airshed groups. WPACs are certainly a part of that particular set of players and organizations that are involved in monitoring. We have industry associations that have formed to create a monitoring organization. We have government involved in the ambient monitoring. We have industry also playing a role in conducting ambient monitoring activities. Okay? So there isn't a shortage of people or organizations that are involved in monitoring here in this province. Okay? What we have a lack of is a coordination of those activities. Okay? People do things, but we might be duplicating effort. So it's not a case of not having a focus on monitoring. I think it's a case of we need to shift ourselves to make sure that where we do focus on monitoring, there is coordinated effort, there's efficiency in the system, and the things that we are monitoring are actually the things that we want to monitor. The fourth column, as I've called them, as islands of knowledge, that's also a issue that I believe that if we don't sort of transform our system, it's not going to be a sustainable path for the future. And what I mean by islands of knowledge is that those organizations that I just talked about who do those types of activities of monitoring of the environment, they treat that data as if it were their own. So they hold on to knowledge. They hold on to the data. And rarely are you able to acquire that data. So remember what I said about erosion of social license, that the expectation of people or of the public these days is they don't want to just simply accept the conclusion that you reached on what the state of the environment is. They want to be able to see the data that you use to make that assessment, and they expect to be able to use that data on their own to come to their own conclusion. Now, irregardless of what expertise they hold, or irregardless of what sort of background they have, that's the expectation of public right now. That goes to credibility of the monitoring system, right? But right now, under our current system, right, we have these islands of knowledge. Alberta Environment and Sustainable Resource Development. Do we do monitoring of the ambient environment? Absolutely. Okay. Do we generally share it? Well, we try to share it. But we don't put out data, necessarily. Or if we do put out data, we don't quite make it as what I'll call easy to access in forms that you might find as useful. Okay? Monitoring organizations right now, same thing. Okay? Yes, they put out data. Yes, they might share some data. That's QA, QC. Okay? It comes in forms that they determine. It's not very, what I'll call, user-friendly at times. It may not meet certain needs of researchers versus I jokingly say, the soccer parent whose only concern is what's the air quality in my region? Do I need to be worried? So that's our current system, and really what it boils down to is that from a management perspective, there is, in my view, a broken chain of evidence that we can't trace back, or we can't link current data that we have in terms of monitoring of the environment to what I'll call policy choices or regulatory choices that we are making. Okay? And that's not a sustainable path going forward in the future. So, what is the new system that we are striving to build here in the province? And I usually like to indicate that in this slide, I've put 4 key characteristics that a new system has to include. It's very few words, but I would say chock full of implications all across this province. So that the new system that we are striving to transition to and put in place here in Alberta is one that is centrally coordinated, one that is integrated amongst the media of air, land, water, and biodiversity, one that is science-based, and one that is open and transparent from a data and information perspective. So, as I said, very few words describing characteristics, chock full of implications. Okay, and usually I like to sort of focus on the last one of open and transparent, what that means. Okay? And what that means is, just from a government of Alberta perspective, a very different change in mindset. Okay? Right now, our sort of mindset within government is we hold things close to vest, right? We'll only put it out when we think we're ready. Okay? We'll QA and QC it to death, right? Because we're concerned about how the public might interpret some data. And I think that if we are truly to move towards an open and transparent system, we've got to get over that. Okay? You've got to be able to say, you know what, someone reading a gauge that's on the North Saskatchewan River is going to see some things that are happening almost in real-time basis. That's okay. But, like I said, 4 key characteristics, chock full of implications. So, I'd like to also try and summarize in terms of a broad perspective, what are the changes in the monitoring system that we can expect from those 4 key characteristics. As I indicated, the government intends to create an arm's length public agency to be the leader of the system, and that agency will be, in essence, the system operator. There will be an evolution to what I'll call a cumulative effects focus in terms of monitoring. Right now, our focus has been more of a compliance focus. So, i.e., we want people to continue to measure their end of stack, end of pipe, and we've sort of just sort of moved into a little bit of monitoring of the ambient condition to sort of basically verify that compliance. I think what we are trying to do now is trying to flip that on its sort of head and say, you know what, our first focus is really on what is the state of the ambient environment, and recognize that compliance will give us that information, but that the focus really needs to be on what is happening to the ambient as opposed to what's only coming out of the stacks and what's only coming out of the pipes. Okay. The third and fourth bullet on this slide, quite key and quite critical in my view. Ambient monitoring activities must align to desired monitoring system within the regions. So this gets to the coordinated piece as well, that if you're going to conduct ambient monitoring activities within a region, they have to be aligned to the system that the agency is trying to put in place for that particular region. And fourthly, that funding for monitoring organizations and activities will likely be allocated through the agency at some point in the future. Okay? And what I mean by some point in the future, meaning when the agency is up and running and operational. I want to just cover this slide very quickly. You're saying, well, where does monitoring fit in the whole sort of management part of our resource play here in Alberta? I want to let you know that the Alberta government is operating under an integrated resource management framework. The integrated resource management framework has in essence, or has in my mind, three components. First component being a cumulative effects approach, and that is sort of encapsulated by the regional plans that have been put in place by Alberta Environment and Sustainable Resource Development. Those regional plans really talk about outcomes and also establishes what I'll call the limits for the environment within various regions of the province. The first plan that has been put in place is the Lower Athabasca Regional Plan, okay, and that sets certain outcomes. Second component of the IRMS, as we call it, is policy assurance, policy clarity. We've done that for the oil and gas and coal sector by moving towards a single regulatory body for that particular sector. And that is to be in place by June of 2013. And the third component of the IRMS, and I think from my perspective, one of the key pieces of the IRMS is the monitoring agency and the transition to a new monitoring system, which will provide scientific information that will be used to support policy and regulatory decision-making here in the province. I've basically covered this slide, but this was just trying to give you a sense of what the agency's role is in the new IRMS. The agency, just in terms of some key characteristics, that they will be accountable to the Minister of ESRD, responsible for coordination of baseline monitoring, cumulative effects monitoring, data evaluation and management. And I think a key point here for the WPACs in the room, the agency does see itself as accountable for the ongoing SOE reporting in all regions of the province. I think I would be remiss if I didn't make this point and talk about the work that we do with partners across the system. And certainly one of the key partners that we work with are the people in this room, particularly those that are associated with the WPACs in this province. The Minister and I were in a meeting with a number of WPACs about a month ago. I think that it's important for us to recognize, and I'm sure the Minister will say this when she gets here today at noon and makes her address, is that we value those partnerships with groups such as WPACs. We value our partnerships with the airsheds as well. We value our partnerships with all the stewardship groups that we work with. And we believe that even in transforming to a new system for monitoring of the environment, that those partnerships need to be continued, and those partners will play a pretty important role in the monitoring system as we go forward. I've indicated to a number of groups that I've met with that we need to ensure that there's an orderly transition to the new system that we are trying to put in place. And what an orderly transition means to me is that no one is going to be all of a sudden outright told, no, you can't do that, or no, you shouldn't do that. Okay? That we have to, that I, as the current lead for the system, I have to have a good understanding as to what activities are going to take place and how we might transition some of those activities and or improve upon the opportunities that groups such as WPACs might have going forward. Okay? And we will make sure that there is a good understanding of mandates and roles going forward. So, just very quickly, here are some of the things that we've been doing to sort of move the system forward. There's been a management board of 6 Albertans appointed to help guide our efforts going forward. The directive that's been given to me is to create and have the agency up and operational within the year, within the next year. This was a slide done in late 2012, so I'll tell you that my time frame is getting shorter and shorter, and the directive that I've been given is get this thing up and running by at least the end of 2013. We're also implementing and operating the joint oil sands monitoring program with Environment Canada within the oil sands region. And our current work right now is to try and work on this enhanced reporting mechanism that would lead to an open and transparent access to information and data. One last slide, and just to give you a very quick sort of run through, I'm not going to run through it all, but people might ask, well, what is this joint oil sands monitoring plan? What does it do? It is a new program that was just launched last year. When we turn the fiscal calendar to 13-14, that'll be our second year of operation. But it is a joint program. It is all about enhanced monitoring within the oil sands region by having more sampling sites, sampling for more parameters, and sampling more frequently. It is a science-based program, and the intent between Canada and Alberta is to share that information that comes from that monitoring program once it becomes available. So with that, I think I've run through where we are in this sort of transition to a new monitoring system. My belief is that this is a very significant directional change for Alberta, one that in my mind is quite progressive, quite new. Other jurisdictions are beginning to look to Alberta in terms of asking me, as an example, what are you guys doing? How can you give us some advice as to how we might begin to transform systems in other jurisdictions?